Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the English with Kirsty podcast. And you may have seen on social media, if you're listening to this in June or July 2025, that the podcast is going to be 10 soon. So we're having an online event to celebrate 10 years of the English with Kirsty podcast. I will put the link to the event in the show notes. And if you don't use LinkedIn, then you can send me an email, podcast@englishwithkirsty.com. And I will send you the link. But it's being organised on LinkedIn because that's my social media platform of choice these days. And the idea was really to bring guests and listeners together, to bring together a group of people who are passionate about languages and learning. I'm planning some other activities. I won't list them all here, but the idea is to find some other podcasts that may be interesting for you and to have some conversations around language and learning and how language is a part of our lives. So if you'd like to come to that, either have a look at the link in the show notes page and you can sign up there, or send me a message to podcast@englishwithkirsty.com. And if you're listening after July 2025, then this episode is still for you because we're going to talk about the things that I've learned and the things that may also be relevant to you if you're starting a new project, because I didn't want to just do this to talk about my story because I think it's super interesting. I'm doing it because I think that this experience gives us something to talk about in terms of projects that last longer or consistency. I certainly learned a lot about consistency in the last 10 years, and change, because I think one of the biggest mistakes we can make is to think that we have to have everything sorted out before we even start. Everything has to be perfect. We need to know everything, and life doesn't work like that because a lot of the learning goes on during the journey. Sometimes we change things. We don't want to keep going in the same direction that we started out in, and part of, I believe, the success of things that have been going on for longer is the ability to move and to change, either because of external influences, things are changing around you, or just because you're not the person you were 10 years ago. I'm not. I've definitely learned a lot and changed, and it's making sure that the content you create, whether that's a podcast or whether you create content in some other way, is still working for you in a way that feels good. Because if you keep pushing yourself to do something that isn't working for you, you're going to lose all motivation and interest in doing that thing. So I've got a list of 10 things here that are related to my podcast and my experience, but maybe you'll relate to some of them too, with the projects that you're involved in or the things that you're just starting, because I think there's a big pressure on us sometimes to want to see instant success and to abandon things if they aren't like an overnight success, but life isn't like that. You need consistency, you need to keep working. Obviously, if something clearly isn't working, there's another conversation to be had, but things take time, whether that's building a community or a YouTube channel or following on another social media platform or a podcast. And that's what I want to talk about today. So I have 10 things. So the first thing is, I touched on it already, but you have to start. So it's kind of obvious, but you don't get anywhere if you don't start. I think everybody knows that, but what I mean more is that there were some things that I did before I started the podcast. I got some training about how to use the editing software because I didn't know how to do that. I read a lot of information about how you set up your feed and where you have to submit it and how all that stuff works. So I think it's good to do some research. I also made a list of some of the episodes that I wanted to do so that I wasn't in a position where I had started this podcast and run out of ideas. I think you need to keep getting new ideas, but even if you don't create the content, I think it's good to at least make a list of 10 things that you could talk about. That worked for me to show that I did have ideas. But other things, they were work in progress. So I didn't start with the microphone that I have now. I bought a better one once I realised that I did enjoy making the podcast, and it was something I wanted to continue doing. And similarly with the editing software, I use paid software, but I didn't at the beginning. The ads began to drive me crazy, so I upgraded. But you know, you don't have to start with the biggest investment if you're not sure if it's something you want to do. So starting is important, but starting with all the pieces in place is not so important if you get the main things down and the main things that you feel you can't start without, and then start, because otherwise you'll never get anywhere. So the second thing is, it's a journey. So for me, the podcast that I started with in 2015 is not the podcast I have now. I prefer the one that I have now. It feels a lot more like me, but that's also because I've changed and my business has changed and the kind of work that I do has changed. And so the podcast had to change with me. I had to bring it with me, because otherwise I would be creating content that was disconnected with my business, and that doesn't work. You know, you have to be prepared. And when I look back now, I think, I'm not so proud of some of this content. It wasn't that it was factually incorrect. It was just, I know I can do better than I did 10 years ago. And if we can't say that, then it shows that there's been no growth and no progress. So that's the worst position to be in, than someone looking back and thinking, this stuff from 10 years ago isn't the best I can do. So that shows growth, and I'm okay with that. But what I mean is, it's a journey. We learn through mistakes. We learn through things that work well. We learn through speaking with others. I think it's really good to talk with other podcasters and learn from them, because this journey is all about learning, and it's important that we stay open to learning new things, trying new things. And if you try it and it doesn't work, then you don't need to try it again. But I think it's good to be open to new formats, maybe to have episodes in other languages in the future. That's not something I've done before. Now I'm saying it here. Maybe I will come back to that. But yeah, that's something I haven't done before. But when I think about this year, there's been more group episodes, and I really enjoy that. So I think it's good to try new things and to enjoy the journey. So number 3 is you're more likely to stick with things if you're committed to them. So if you like the format, if you like the platform, I know that when I started the podcast, part of it was just like a reaction to everyone telling me I should do video, and I didn't want to do video. That doesn't mean that I won't appear on other people's videos. I'm happy to do that. But I didn't want to create a video podcast, and I didn't want to create, say, a YouTube channel or something with a lot of video content, because that's not what I wanted to do. So I thought, well, I've got so much, I've benefited so much from working with podcasts in the past that I could do this. I could do an audio podcast. And so that's what I did. And a lot of people who were saying the only way is video, I'm not creating content now, like some of the people that I remember from that time. But I think it's good to think, okay, what do you like to do? Maybe you don't want to speak, you don't enjoy that. Maybe you're a writer, and so then write. Like, nobody can tell you the best way to communicate with other people, only you know that. So think about, if you want to create content for others, what works for you. Obviously people need to want to read and listen to it as well, but you know, start with what do you enjoy most and what feels more comfortable for you. There are people who hate writing, and others who hate speaking. So yeah, if it's your content, so think about what works for you. Number 4 is sometimes you need a break, and that's okay. I mean, I talk about 10 years of the English with Kirsty podcast, but it isn't 10 years consistently every week there's an episode, whatever's happening in the world. It's not like that. There was a time during the pandemic when I went for several weeks without posting anything, because I needed that time for other things, but also I didn't have inspiration, and I didn't want to just put content out for the sake of it, because then it would feel like a chore. Like, it's Tuesday, I must have my podcast content out for Wednesday. I think it's good to be consistent, but I also think if you need a break, then you should take one. Otherwise, you're going to burn out, you're going to lose interest in the project. And so, yeah, everyone needs a break, and there's nothing nothing wrong with taking one. And I also take smaller ones, like if I'm on holiday, for example, I don't always put something out because I know I'm not going to be there to engage with people, to promote it in the same way. And other people have different ideas about that. They can do them, but I'm just saying that it's important, especially if you're planning to do something over a longer period of time, to build in breaks as well. Number 5 is sometimes you get a glimpse into the lives of the listeners, and I really enjoy that, to learn about the people who are listening to the content, to find out that someone's going hiking with the content, or someone's taking their dog for a walk, or to find out the different places where people are listening from as well. I know somebody contacted me and I thought, that's really interesting. I haven't done any kind of podcast promotion in your country, and I know that you're listening there. That's really cool. So I think for all of us who consume content, sometimes we just enjoy it and carry on to the next podcast in our feed or whatever. But sometimes if you take the time to let the content creator know who you are or what you enjoyed or what you learned, I really enjoy that. And I'm trying to be better at that as well. So when I've enjoyed something that another podcast host has created, to take the time just to send them a quick message and either thank them or tell them what I learned, or just make that connection, because we can see the numbers, but the numbers are just numbers. There are people behind the numbers, and for me that's more interesting, to really get into who those people are, and to meet people and to have conversations with people. That's really important. Speaking of numbers, I think that's the next point, is it's not all about the numbers, because there's part of us, I mean, I want to see growth. I want to see, I like it when the numbers keep going up. It makes us feel good. It's the same with social media. How many likes, how many comments, how many interactions, and all these metrics are important, and I'm not saying they aren't, but for me, I had to learn that the numbers aren't everything, because my podcast started off as a very general podcast about learning English that was relevant to a bigger section of the English learning population, but they were less engaged. I had less conversations. There were less people that were the kind of people that I was working with, probably. If I look back, it's fair to say that. Whereas now, my audience has become more specific, and that means that it can't just be about the numbers. I want to see them. I want to see them going up, but the interaction and the engagement, however you measure that engagement, is as important as how many people listen to my podcast. Obviously, the more people who listen, the better it is, because more people find out about the podcast, and I definitely want that to happen. But I think if you focus only on the number of plays or downloads, then you're missing part of the story, because you're missing, do those people make contact? Do those people, are they really benefiting? Because the other part of that is that there is a lot of content out there that is very general about learning English, maybe at a lower language level as well, with more support for English learners. And my clients don't tend to be in that situation. A lot of the time they are people who are fairly proficient in English. They need other kinds of help, but they don't need to learn some basic sentences. So sometimes when you're creating content, you can create something that's very general, very generic, that might get lost in a sea of similar content, but would be relevant to more people. Or you can think, no, who is my audience? How can I make it more specific, more targeted? Okay, it becomes a bit more niche, but then it is also more relevant, and it's easier to stand out doing something that is you, that is different, and that shows more clearly how you add value. And that's the journey that I needed to go on with the numbers and understanding that. The next point is that having a podcast has opened up conversations that I would never have had before. So it's given me the opportunity, having a platform, to have conversations with some really interesting people. And that's good, because I could bring that content to my listeners, but I also learned a lot through those conversations. And I'm grateful to have the podcast as a platform so that I can have those conversations and then share that information with my listeners. I think it's fun being part of other people's journeys. So partly this year I've spoken with a number of people who hadn't been on a podcast before, and were maybe a bit nervous about doing that because it's a new experience. And so I enjoyed their being on English with Kirsty, that being their first experience, because they enjoyed it, then they'd be more likely to do it again. So that was fun, but also some of the guests have returned, so it's really interesting to see their journey as well, like people who maybe came and talked about a topic and then came back again, and we could see what's happened in their lives or their businesses, or how that journey continued. It wasn't just a one-time thing, but it was getting to know people. And there are also people who have become friends having been on the podcast. That's also a way for me to find new friends and new contacts, new business contacts, friends, and just people that I've stayed in touch with because we met through the podcast, but that's just the beginning of the story. I can't make this list without making a quick reference to technology, and sometimes it feels like it hates you, like things that go wrong, and how you cope with that. So that's what I had to learn, like how do you fix certain problems, and also how do you go back and tell someone that their episode didn't record and you needed to do it again. That happened to me quite early on, and also I won't go into the specifics, but there was an issue last year where my feed went offline in one of the main podcast platforms for a while, and it was a challenge getting that resolved. But at the same time, I learned some things as well about technology and how various interfaces work, and how some customer service teams are more helpful than others, but all of this is a learning experience. But I remember from a time before I started my business, I was involved in a situation where we had to do a considerable amount of work again, and my manager at the time said, well, this time it will be better, won't it? And I'm not someone who likes to repeat things multiple times, but if you have no choice because the thing didn't record, then yeah, next time will be better. And the last thing is that this format isn't going anywhere. Like, there have been times when people said, oh, nobody's going to listen to podcasts anymore, something else is going to take its place, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. There are so many new podcasts, there are so many podcasts that have been going for a long time, and when you look at the listener numbers, I don't believe that the podcasts are going anywhere. So I'm glad to have found it as a format that works for me. And if you're thinking of doing something similar, then I would encourage you to do it, because these last 10 years have been a lot of fun for me. I've met some really interesting people, had some great conversations. Some of what I do is specifically interview based. I've got an episode coming up soon where I'm interviewing a group of people because we're talking about a topic that I don't know about and I want to know more about it, so I'm going to ask them questions. But sometimes it's a conversation. And I like to have this mix of solo episodes, interviews, and conversations, because I think that feels more real. And in a time when some content is being created that doesn't feel particularly real or genuine, I think it's good to keep that, to have real conversations with real people. And if you're thinking about doing the same, then I would encourage you to do it, because it's a really good way. People may ask, have I found clients through the podcast? And yeah, I have. I'm not sure that I would say it's my main source of clients, because generally people get to know me through maybe the podcast, and then through social media, and then through events, and at some point along that journey, some people become customers too. I have had customers who just said, oh, I heard your podcast and now I'd like to meet you and have a chat about how you can help me. So yes, in answer to that question, I have found customers through the podcast, and I don't have sponsored advertising on my podcast. The only advertising is for what I'm doing if I've got events coming up. So yeah, in terms of a marketing tool, if you want to call it that, I have found customers that way, but I've also found that it really helps in terms of building my brand, in terms of reach, in terms of people finding out what I do, and then that leading to other conversations that also sometimes leads to finding new customers. So yep, I have found customers, but it's more than that. It's a lot more. So if you're thinking about doing it, then go for it and let us know when you have, so that we can support you. And if you are around on the 10th of July 2025 at 4 p.m. UK Portugal time, 5 p.m. Central European time, then come and sign up for the podcast celebration, and it will be good to meet you there. Have a great week.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.